Good morning and welcome to the 48th Annual Pasadena Mayor's Interfaith Prayer Breakfast. As you can see, in 2021, it's not exactly a breakfast. We're doing an interesting virtual series that we hope will bring the same kind of inspiration and comfort to our community that the in-person breakfast has. And of course, we hope to be back to in-person next year at the Convention Center. My name is Melanie Goodyear, and I'm the Executive Director of Jericho Road Pasadena. We're so thankful this year that JRP has been given the opportunity to organize this event. It has not been quite what we expected, but again, we're really happy to have a community event that will bring inspiration, I think, at a particular time of need. And now I'd like to introduce Pasadena's Mayor, Victor Gordo. Victor.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome. I'd first like to thank Melanie and JRP for putting this together and ensuring that this tradition continues. I'd like to thank Dr. Roberts for being here with us. And being a part of this event. This is one of the most beautiful facilities that we're sitting in right now, the Rose Bowl, and so I'd like to welcome all of you to your stadium, Pasadena's Rose Bowl Stadium.
And now I'd like to introduce Dr. Terrence Roberts. As many of you know, Dr. Roberts was a member of the Little Rock Nine in 1957, so was a racial justice pioneer, and since then has been a mental health professional, a leader in community and social justice issues. Welcome, Dr. Roberts.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for having me as a part of this. I've always looked forward to an opportunity to talk about the need for spiritual awareness among the whole population, because I think our problems can only be resolved when we begin to change the narrative we live by. And I think if we can change that narrative to the good, so much the better.
Amen to that. So today, rather than the kind of talking head boxes we've often looked at in the past year, we're going to have a very open conversation, free-flowing about the role of faith, the community work that both Dr. Roberts and Mayor Gordo have done over such long, wonderful lives of community service. So we hope you enjoy this interview, and again, we hope that you take some time today to deepen your own faith, to take some time to appreciate where you are, that if you're healthy, that you are grateful for that, and to think about how you can connect more with your community. Mayor Gordo, I'd like to start off by asking you a little bit about the faith community in Pasadena. We do have a huge number of faith congregations. Will you tell us a little bit about the faith communities in Pasadena and why are they important to you?
You know, the faith community has played a very important role in Pasadena for generations, and you know, including in my own life, growing up in Pasadena. I grew up in a family that attended St. Philip's and St. Andrew's Church in Pasadena, and the community at both of those churches was very inspirational to me. And I believe that the faith community has played an important role, not just for me, but for all of Pasadenans, you know, not just in times of need like we've experienced in the last year, or with people who are in need. But really, on a daily basis, the faith community in Pasadena has helped to uplift, give inspiration to families, to individuals, to young people, to everyone in Pasadena. And so I'm very grateful to our faith community and to the diversity of our faith community and the important role that our faith community plays in Pasadena and has played in my own life.
Yeah, and I've been so impressed. I think faith communities have done exactly what they should do since the pandemic. I have seen so many groups taking food to shut-in seniors, giving out food to their communities, giving out food to PUSD kids. I'd like to ask you a little bit more personal question. So you came from Zacatecas, Mexico at 5 years old, speaking no English. Was the church a place where you found community? I'm assuming you felt this huge sense of sort of alienation and being overwhelmed in a new language, new culture. How did the church help ground you and your family?
We found community at St. Philip's Church. My mother was very active at the church with the Spanish-speaking community out of necessity because it's the only language we spoke. And when my family arrived from Zacatecas, Mexico, and I was 5 years old, that's where we found community, that's where we found refuge, that's where we found inspiration. My mother was very active with the parent group, helped establish the first Spanish Mass at St. Philip's, and we did so with a little activism. I remember holding my first sign I wouldn't call it a picket line, but trying to draw the attention of the administration at St. Philip's so that we would have a Spanish Mass at St. Philip's. And so besides finding community, besides finding hope, and people who we could relate with. We also found a little activist spirit at St. Philip's that I think had a tremendous impact on me in my life.
I think so. That sounds like the seeds of everything you've done since then for our community, which is great. Dr. Roberts, will you tell us a little bit about the Little Rock Nine? I would love to talk with you at length about your experience trying to integrate a school, but tell us the kind of quick version. Who are the Little Rock Nine?
The quick version is I grew up in Little Rock, Arkansas, which at the time I was born was not really the most propitious place for somebody like me to show up, based on the law and the customs that were reigning at the time. But I found a way to contend with it, primarily based upon input from my mom and others in the community where I lived. They taught me that in spite of all the craziness around me, none of it had anything to do with me, which may seem like a bit of an odd thing, but they pointed out that my definition of who I was would come from other sources. And one of those other sources was the introduction they made to me through church, through the people at that congregation. I learned very early on that the Bible was a tremendous resource for me. But one of the startling things that I picked up also very early was reading what the Bible said and then seeing what the people were doing. There was no match. There was incongruence. And I was a little puzzled, but I kept going. I didn't give it up. Then I was able to come to some resolution, and that was each person has the responsibility of deciding whether or not to accept principles that are contained in that book. And it's free will. No one's forced. You can't force anybody to choose one or the other. And so I thought, okay, I can deal with that. So I began to develop my own approach by learning how to navigate through the world with all of these various and sundry ways of being. I mean, there are people in my life who have no belief system at all, and others you would consider very extreme. I'm comfortable in anybody's company at this point because I understand more. And I think that's one of the secrets I had to surviving Little Rock, because there's no good reason why we all survived. They truly wanted to kill all of us, and they tried mightily, but they weren't successful. And I think there was something providential in that itself.
Yeah, another amen to that, I think. I was a pretty thoughtful teenager. I was already doing social justice work. I was not risking my life to integrate a school, right? Nothing I did as a teenager. Tell me a little bit more about what that experience was like, being one of 9 black kids trying to integrate a school with hundreds of clearly hostile people.
Well, I must say that the intensity of the opposition was startling. I'd anticipated opposition. That was not a question, because given that society at that time and the social climate, I knew there would be many, many people opposed to our presence. But to see the faces, and I would replicate it for you here if I could, but I don't know how individuals twist their faces to that degree. But they had it down to a science, and it was frightening. So the first thing I can talk about is the fear I held and took with me that entire year. I'd never been that afraid in my life. I didn't even think it was possible for a human being to be that afraid. I thought, wow, if you were that afraid, you'd probably just keel over and die. How could you manage it? But I learned how to accept the fear as my own. I was afraid. That was my choice of response. Other people weren't making me afraid, and that was a revelation. Once I understood that, then I could extrapolate from that and talk about taking control of all of my responses, not putting the blame or the responsibility on others. And I think that's something that's obviously missing in the society as a whole, because there are a lot of people pointing fingers and blaming others, when in fact we have to start with self first.
Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things that faith can do for us is really take us outside of our own kind of small world and ground us in these larger values that really help people get over the fear, the concerns, the kind of selfish pettiness sometimes.
Well, if they want to, they can. There's always that.
Yeah, right.
They may not want to. They may not want to give it up.
Yeah. Did you have specific support, for example, from your church?
I remember one minister who told me point blank, he said, you have no business up there. But, he said, since you're there, you might as well stay. Now, I must tell you, I was confused about that message for a long time. Then I figured out he was probably just hedging his bet one way or the other.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. Yeah.
But I must say, though, as a whole, congregation, was not divided so much as there were some people who weren't sure that this was the right thing, but a lot of them were.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think that revolutionary message that is inherent in so many religions. Now, we all come from a Christian background, and so Jesus' message of love was revolutionary, but so was Buddha's, so was the Prophet Muhammad's. I mean, I think the spiritual leaders that we see in our world are all demanding us to live at a level of kind of love that is not very inherent to humans, right?
Thank you, Dr. Roberts, for sharing your thoughts. I see a lot of parallels in our life's experience. Being able to use faith, use family to capture the internal fear that allows us to then grow, not only to help ourselves and those around us, but beyond that, to help our community in general. And as an immigrant to Pasadena, to the United States, speaking Spanish, being frowned upon, I recall some of the same fears and having to be willing to say, I'm going to set those fears aside and do what I know needs to be done, not just for my family and for me, but for our community. And I trace that back to our church and our faith in our church community. When I was young, my mother, we lived in a garage, a 2-car garage, but my mother would still show up with all of us in tow at St. Philip's to help deliver food to families in need. And so here we were living in a garage, but still going out to help those in need. And that taught me a lesson. That taught me a lesson about, well, we may be poor, but there are actually people who are financially poorer than us. And, we have the love of our family, and we should use that to strengthen ourselves and go help those who even are lower economically down the scale than we are. And so, I've taken that drive to help people into politics, into community leadership, but also in my work as a labor attorney, helping individuals and helping to improve the quality of life and working conditions for people at their work site. And that's what I do every day, and I do trace it back to, being congruent, listening to the words of our faith leaders at St. Philip's, the priests, and then ensuring that we live our lives that way. And I think you couldn't have said it better, looking for congruence in the words, but also in how we live our lives. And so I've sought to do that in life.
Yeah, I think another amen to that. One of the things I really love about this event is I think that it brings together the best that faith can bring out in us when faith in some cases has been so divisive, as I think you're mentioning. How, particularly because a lot of faith groups don't have a great past with race and racial relations, what do you think the role of faith congregations is, especially in a community like Pasadena, where we do have such multicultural churches, masjids, temples, et cetera, et cetera? What's the role of faith in helping us to overcome racial injustice, to really come together as community?
I think it gets back to the individual members in any congregational group based on their understanding as created beings. We all have a responsibility to figure out the answers to some of the basic questions. For instance, why are we here? What's our purpose? How did this all start? Many in our society glom onto the evolutionary concept that we all evolved from some organism that was very elementary. Doesn't make sense when you really look at it. And you look at the order out of this chaos, there's really order. And I don't think that's all by accident. And so from that, individuals then dig deeper to find out, okay, so what is my purpose? And then finding that, then by all means, it would include accepting existence for self, but also for others on a basis of equality. None of us is created differently from the other in the essential sense. We all matter. Everybody matters. And if that understanding were planted in the minds of each individual, our problems would disappear. There wouldn't be a problem to resolve because everybody would be on board with the fact that I'm sharing this space. I'm a part of the planet. I live here and so do you. Let's figure out how to be together.
And I think, again, I feel like that value of equality is so deep in most faith groups. So, I mean, the message in the New Testament, there's no longer Greek or Jew, there's no male nor female, right? We are all one in God, and certainly Islam.
But see, the message, Melanie, is there.
Right.
But it
whether we follow
floats
it.
over the head of a lot of people. I was just reading this morning, and Paul, in his exhortation to the Galatians and also to the Ephesians, he's asking them, why have you gone astray? I told you what was true. Why have you, so he's constantly trying to get them back. And so with the prophets before, going all the way back to Elijah and Elisha and all of those folk, the message was essentially the same thing. You've got to follow the dictates that come from the Creator. Nothing else matters.
Yeah, yeah. And some of those Old Testament exhortations of, let justice roll down like rolling water. I mean, those are lovely exhortations that I feel give pretty clear dictums to us.
I find it to be extremely clear when you read it. I'm still puzzled about why many people don't accept it. I don't fight it, but I just, I note it. It's an odd thing for me.
Yeah.
Very odd.
Absolutely. Humans are fallible, and so are the institutions we build, including religious ones, without a doubt. I'd like to talk with you a little bit more about that question of, faith communities have had such divisive impact in many cases, where you are now mayor of a city of 140,000 people with huge diversity, religious, ethnic, political. How do you see religion's role in bringing us together? Do you see that happening in Pasadena, that we're doing interfaith work, and how is that contributing to the community?
I think so. I think the, one of the silver linings of any crisis is a crisis tends to bring us together. And I do see in the last year, both involving the need to improve social justice, improve healthcare access as a result of COVID. All of these crises have brought us together, and I see the role of our religious institutions opening up to help do that. And as Dr. Roberts points out, that's always been the role of religious institutions, but it always hasn't, getting back to the word of the day, congruence. The institutions haven't always been congruent with the missions and goals and the words that we all should live by. And so I think this crisis, I'm hoping, will serve to get us back on track, to ensure that we're all accepting as individuals of our friends and neighbors and people who we share space with, and that will ultimately filter up to pushing institutions to do the same thing.
Mm-hmm. One example that I've really loved, which I think is huge credit to Pasadena's Public Health Department and to Black churches, has been the collaboration that the Public Health Department has had to have vaccination sites at Black churches. And I think as an old stock white American, understanding why Black people feel concerned about participating in public health, and then realizing that Black churches are a place that the Black community can trust, and having that collaboration. I think that's been a wonderful example to me of where faith communities can do so much more than sort of go sit on Sunday and sing some nice songs or hear something nice, but really do more.
Being active, and really it's the role of our local government and our own civic institutions to recognize that faith institutions are a very important access point and an important trust point, if you will, for communities, for our diverse communities in Pasadena, and we should be working closer together, particularly in times of crisis, but in all times.
Yeah, certainly our public health department has done an amazing job in the past year, but I really was impressed at that proactive collaboration. I just thought that was so lovely, and the Black churches for stepping up as well and doing something that's really far beyond their capacity. Being vaccination sites is not normally what
absolutely.
churches do, so.
And I think, other departments can learn from what the health department is accomplishing. The Rec and Parks Department, job training programs can learn by partnering with African American churches, Latino churches, all churches and institutions to try and gain the trust of communities who maybe would not trust civic organizations or don't know enough about civic city departments or civic organizations to take that leap of faith. I think we can use the health department's example to build on.
Absolutely, absolutely. My last question for both of you is, it's been a rough 13, 14 months. What's your message of hope for our community? What should bring us hope and joy whenever people watch this?
Well, this may not sound hopeful. It may even sound like a message of despair. But this pandemic is not the last pandemic. So perhaps the hopeful thing is to adjust our thinking and our mentation to include the future, which will bring something that nobody knows, but I know, just based on historical evidence, that it will not be getting better. It will be getting worse. And I say that because there's a passage from Scripture that I like a lot, and it comes from Jeremiah 12. Jeremiah is so excited and upset because things aren't going right, and he wants God to fix it. And God listens patiently for the first 4 verses of Jeremiah 12, and then in verse 5 he responds by saying, "If you have run with the footmen, and they have wearied thee, how will you contend with horses? And if in the land of peace, where you live by the Jordan, how will you contend when it overflows its banks and floods you?" Now, personally, I don't see that as despairing. I see that as hopeful because you're prepared beforehand. You know what's coming, and you can adjust your way of being to deal with it. So we just have to deal with what's there.
I've been so happy to see the upswell of racial justice work in the past year especially. But I also think there are lots of young people who maybe don't quite realize how much racial justice work has gone on since the founding of our country. What's your message of hope about kind of playing the long game, right? Having the long view of justice and it being iterative.
Well, I think for young people especially, I always urge them to do their own reading. Many of them don't read, so they don't know. They get their message from social media or they hear it from others. But if they understood the historical trajectory, they would see for themselves that the work has been going on. It's been opposed. The opposition gets stronger as we go along. And so they should know that too. And to the point I was making earlier, the opposition will get even stronger. It will be stronger tomorrow. And if we're not ready for that, too many people are content to attain a victory, i.e. the murder trial of George Floyd, or Chauvin rather. And they think, okay, we've done it. No, we haven't. No, we haven't. That's simply a marker in time and space. More to come, much more to come. And maybe if we can get them to do their own study and reading, they will transform and begin to think seriously about getting rid of their storehouse of ignorance and shrinking it down over time.
What's your message of hope for our community?
You know, I agree with Dr. Roberts that, well, you know, there is more to come. And I think, you know, as a community and as a society, we've learned that things do get tougher. You know, it's like chipping at an ice block. The closer you get to the center, the harder it gets. And we have to keep chipping away, and we have to realize and communicate to young people that people like Dr. Roberts and others have been chipping away for quite some time. And the closer we get, the more the opposition hardens. And we have to pull together to break through that ice. And I think we'll get there. And you know, one victory at a time, all pulling together. And I am hopeful that we've learned some lessons. At least this generation has learned some lessons about working together through COVID, through the social justice issues in the last year. I think they're important reminders that it is a long game. It's not one victory and then we all go home. You know, it's not like a football game where, you know, you play the game, then you go back into the locker room, take the pads off, get on the bus and go home. No, you recommit yourself after a game to coming back and being ready for the next challenge and ensuring that you're ready to tackle it again. And I am hopeful that young people will recognize that, but we have to keep reminding them. And remind them not just for themselves, but for generations that come after them, that this is a very long game, and we have to keep at it.
Yeah. When I look back at those passages I love from the Jewish Bible, I think, Isaiah was calling for social justice, what was that, 4,000 years ago, right? And I really believe in that statement that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And I think for me, faith also does really, that's kind of the wellspring in many cases for so many people to say, okay, I'm working at this. I may not see the change every day, but I'm grounded in those values. Yeah. Mayor Gordo, would you like to close us out?
What a stage to share with you here at the Rose Bowl Stadium at the 50-yard line. Your stadium, our stadium, Pasadena and America's stadium. I'm hopeful that we will learn important lessons from the last 14 months of our life's experience. Lessons that we can pass on to continue the fight for social justice, to continue the fight for health access, and to continue down the road of faith here in Pasadena and beyond. So I want to thank both of you for being here today. Even though it's a little bit cool, it may not be as cool when this plays, but it's a beautiful day, and it's an honor to be here with both of you.
Ditto. Thank you both so much. Such an honor to talk with you both. Thank you.